So,
Yeah, man.
this is the 10th episode of our podcast. Really, really special guest today. You're a fucking legend. You're probably one of the best battlers that we ever had. Fucking punchlines out the wazoo, just continuously. Um, Shit, man. Just it's really good to talk to you. I know everybody who knows of you has a lot of respect for you. Um, honestly,
Salute, salute.
yeah, definitely. Honestly, I just kind of want to inquire, like, what have you been up to in the time since I think you put out Azul, was that right, in 2017?
Yeah, see, that's the crazy part, man. It's been a weird road artistically for me lately. Um, Even specifically speaking about Azul, um, that was an EP that I was hoping to have at least 3 to 4 tracks on there that were going to be solid and all that. And I ended up only feeling good about two of them. And I only put those two out with the intention that I was going to add the other two, and I never did it because I just really got sidetracked with life things. You know what I'm saying? So I've just been grinding it out lately, doing this stupid thing called adulthood, making sure things are right, you know, making sure there's bread on the table and all that. Just uh, refocusing on certain life priorities and all that. But it's crazy because I'm always looking for opportunities to get back to the art. So like every once in a while, I'll have like a little bar that just like zooms into my head, and I'll just write it down real quick and stash it. And then like a couple days later, I'm kind of doing the same thing again. So I'm still writing. I'm still um, formulating ideas and all that, but haven't really had time to like really sit down to craft songs. So hoping to get back to it ASAP though.
Word. Well, that's good. You understand the concept of catching lightning in a bottle, and it's kind of random, and you gotta be ready to just snap that shit real quick, so you can come back
Hmm.
to it. Um, but that's really good to hear that you're still focused on being an artist while also kind of like letting it be over here while you focus on yourself, which
Yeah.
everybody has their way of navigating. I'm much more of an all or nothing kind of person, and especially because I don't have a girl, I don't have a lady or a kid or anything like that. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. But
I feel you, man.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
I totally feel you, man. That's one of those things where I'm very similar in that aspect. I'm very much all or nothing, and that's something that I'm learning to change currently. You see what I'm saying? So it's finding the balance in multiple areas of your life and just balancing them at the same time. That's like you don't realize you have to do it till you got to do it.
Yeah, I've been learning to do something similar with my diet and sort of like managing my thoughts, managing my emotions, as well as being able to manage a workflow and constantly like get shit done while also sort of pulling that into the same space where I can work on myself and
Yeah.
I don't have to like break away and do some nonsense for a week and then come back and everything is like dispersed and I got to bring it all back together. My mind is in pieces and you know how it is. But
Yeah.
again, I think for every human being, it's a totally different criteria and a totally different way that we pull things together. So like for one person, it might look like just doubling down all or nothing, and for another person, it might look like you have people you got to support and you got to find a way to turn that all into one process for yourself so that you can continuously go from one thing to the next and keep your momentum, which is not easy, but it's definitely doable.
For sure, man. Yeah, that's the thing too. Remaining flexible and open-minded and I don't know if this is a real word, but adaptable, right?
Right.
Being able to adapt. It's an underrated skill, man. You got to have it for everything, for family situations, for work situations, for music, for just anything, you got to be able to learn and adapt, and survive, and outdo, and well, maybe not outdo necessarily, but just to really have a clear mind in anything that gets thrown your way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it takes I think the irony of that is that people could say that to you from like birth, from childhood, like keep a clear mind, make sure that you stay focused, but you don't understand what that means until you try it over and over again, you fail, and then you realize like it's not something that you can really define like you have a I kind of well, over time I've been feeling like more like maybe it is, but it's just not what a lot of people make it out to be, almost as if they use that concept as a scapegoat when in fact they don't have a clear mind. They just know it's good advice, so they're going to throw that shit out there. But for me, I always look at it cuz I've been meditating for a few years now, and I've been studying like Zen and sort of old school shit like that. And I've realized that what it comes down to is focus. And when you're focused on something, it just means that basically, because we say the entirety of your being, that we don't know what the fuck that means. It's just more so everything that sort of like you feel is directed at what you're doing, rather than like you're washing dishes and you're thinking in your head what you're going to say to your mom, and you're like getting emotional about that and shit, and you're another part of your mind is thinking about waking up for work tomorrow and how you're going to have trouble sleeping or whatever the fuck. But in reality, if you just focus on that one thing at a time, you learn that you can do it more efficiently. And I think that's what it comes down to, is getting shit done efficiently. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you totally, man. The hardest part, dude, you kind of explained it perfectly. Like, our heads are so full of noise at all times. And, well, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm assuming others go through the same thing. You talk to yourself, thinking about this and that, the past, the present, the future,
right?
And you're still trying to manage what you're doing today. And then sooner or later, like, you realize, damn, what did I do all day? Like, did I get anything done? Did I learn anything? Did I even chill? Like,
yeah, no, that's exactly it. I think because after there's levels to everything. I think that's one thing that people really get confused. Is one thing I've noticed people do is they kind of like give themselves, I wouldn't call it an ultimatum, but it's something like, once I get to this point, I'm gonna be good. And what they end up doing is they push that point all the way out until it's beyond where they can go, and they just don't go there at all. Whereas if you just go full force at whatever it is you're trying to figure out and solidify in your life, once you've done it, you realize that turns into 10 more things you can do, and 10 more. So once you learn how to focus initially, that's actually the open door that lets you do shit that you really wanted to do in the first place. Like, I want to say for years now, I've been obsessed with like going through the internet, trying to read references, find out who's full of shit and who actually knows what they're talking about, and then learn from the people who do know. And then this year, because I finally felt like I had a grasp on that, I've been going through just every single day. I kind of split things halfway. Like half of the content I consume, all of the content I consume is sort of related to learning mixing or physics or psychology or language or something. And then the other half is just me doing my regular thing, like I'm working on the podcast, or I'm making a song, or I'm making a beat, or whatever it may be. And there's always a way that it ends up translating, even if it doesn't, like, it's not perfect. One of the things that I really felt so against was the concept of college, where they kind of give you both sides. They give you all the things to do, and they give you all the things to learn. And then when you're out of there, you realize, like, I didn't really want to do that shit. I wanted to know some of that, but now I have to reformat everything so that this applies to whatever it is that interests me in my life. And so few people think about, like, before I go to college, I should know exactly what it is I want to do. I should know what the course is like, and if it really applies to me, and if it's going to manifest what I want it to manifest. And I see a lot of people just going to school because they think it's the thing to do.
Dude, Oh man, this is one of my biggest things just in life, period. I and I fight, or not fight, but I argue about this with plenty of people that are close to me, like family, friends,
Mm,
coworkers.
mm.
Like they all have the same point of view where they're like, well, go to college, get a degree, make sure that you can get go up the ladder, get a good career, this and that. And but man, every time I think about college, the only thing I can think about is that college is kind of like people teaching you things others have already discovered, and I want to discover something else. Like,
Mm.
you know what I'm saying? Like, who's
Right.
not to sound like
And there's no
all
course
like
for
up in
that.
the clouds.
There's no course for
Yeah,
that.
that's what I'm saying.
Like
That's
you
what I'm
can.
saying, man. Like,
Sorry.
yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Okay. I'm just thinking like you can basically like there's a part of you that I don't know how to explain it. It's like when we were kids and there's something you want to do or something you want to know, and there's a part of you that just like pulls you in that direction. You don't know how you end up thinking certain things or doing certain things, but it's almost like your brain always has an idea of I'm going to need to go here in order to get this result. And when you just sort of let the how you say the system, it's not I'm not a supporter of the whole like fuck the system, it's the matrix thing. It's really misguided in my opinion. But there is an
Right.
element of like human beings who are sort of dictating how things should be, they're still equally as human as everybody else. And so if you
Hmm.
can just communicate with yourself and you know what you want, you can we have the internet at this point. Like I don't know, 2000 years ago,
Yeah.
chances were that you were born on like a farm to nobody, or like in a city where people are dying and sick and you can't get a book. There's nowhere to go to learn most of the shit that you might want to know if you want to be like some kind of genius. It's just not possible. But nowadays,
Right.
you could just find it out if you have the patience. The hardest part is
Yeah.
sifting through bullshit.
Yes. Amen to that. Amen. It's just, I mean, like I said, man, it's just, I just feel like, going to school, getting a textbook, and just like doing your homework, you're just literally doing like checkbox items. Like,
Right.
there, I'll tell you, even in the professional side of things, I know so many people that have degrees but don't know how to apply the knowledge. They just don't. And so it's like you learned all this information to not know how to use it. And there's a lot of people that know how to use information, but they don't have it. So where do we meet in the middle? You just got to find information on your own, explore, learn. And when people say education, it kind of ticks me off a little bit because that word is used in context as if it's only as if you can only be educated in school, but you can be educated anywhere, in
Right.
your living room, in your backyard, in your mind, in a conversation with friends. Anything that's information that enlightens you is education. So this whole put us in a box to learn one specific subject the way that only others have explored it before is so crazy to me. That's a crazy concept to me. And then they tell you that you got to pay to do that, to get that information. Well, let me just do it on my own for free, you know?
Right. Right. And that's the
It's
biggest thing is
crazy.
that from a financial standpoint, I think what people don't consider is that whether or not you get a loan, every dollar of that, it's going to be a problem. And all that money that either you're going to pay back in 10 years or you're going to pay back in a year or you got to pay up front, if you just apply the patience, it'll take you probably even less time to learn the things that you want to learn than college is going to make you do it in, right? Because you don't
Yeah.
have to take breaks. The classes are never going anywhere. You could do it 12 hours a day, you could do it 2 hours a day if you wanted to. And all that money is then yours to use for whatever you've learned and to turn that into like some it's like from an artist perspective, there are a lot of people who go to school for music And some of them, like I think an example is Kenny Beats, and it's ironic that he talks about how he went to Berkeley, and he says he felt like Berkeley made him worse as a as a producer. And
Yeah.
most of those people, they have big dreams, and when they come out, they realize their dreams are not doable because they haven't applied everything they need on the level of like confidence and understanding the business and understanding how people make it. Like, one of the things that I'm biggest about is modeling success and finding people who have similar mindsets to you that have gone where you want to go, and then learning everything you can from them. I think as an artist, that's probably one of the most convenient ways to do it, because you get like, as a rapper, I'll use Kendrick Lamar as an example. He has all of this work, and it's so densely packed, and you can continuously learn his techniques for years and years. You can do the same thing with people like, I want to say, like Madlib, people like Timbaland, people like you go back like Dilla and Kanye, and you can continuously sort of watch these examples. So when you observe them, they sort of bleed information out to you. I mean that's all anything is in the universe. It's all information. It's all waves and electromagnetics and all this bullshit. So if you can just learn to unpack the things that are coming at you and turn them into something usable, it's not easy at first. I noticed when I started, I felt like I didn't know how to learn. I actually didn't even tell myself that. What I realized was that after a while, I did know how to learn, and that before that, I had no fucking clue, and I was just going blindly, taking whatever the fuck was like right in front of my face and being like, oh yeah, well, there's this thing that I could learn, but I never understood anything. And when you just see, it's so beyond words, because it's not something that we really consider normal in our society, right?
I totally get you, man. And then you got to put it into perspective too, that everyone has different learning styles.
Right.
So even when, like, kind of like you said, you think you're not learning, but you might be picking something up and you don't even know it till later.
Yeah.
Or sometimes
exactly.
you're just really trying to learn the wrong way and it just doesn't work for you. For rap specifically, like for me, it's kind of I have to do it to get good at it. Like, and I would hope that it's the same for everything else. You know, you got to do it to get better at it.
Right.
But like for me, like I could not just sit there and like try to dissect people's lyrics and just hope that I'm soaking that in somehow. I had to just try it and fail hard.
Right.
And just keep going at it, you know?
Right.
And eventually you start to figure out your own patterns and you're like, okay, I learned by doing, trial and error. I'm going to keep doing that. And it helps and it works pretty well.
Yeah, I agree.
For me, at least.
One of the things that I noticed as a teenager, before I ever started even really thinking about rapping, was I was obsessed with all this music as a kid, and I knew all the lyrics, but if I tried to sing it, it was awful. So for years and years, I would actually see, there was a point where I lost my freedom, and it's a long story, but I was staying in this facility, and the only thing I could do to pass the time was have somebody print out the lyrics for a lot of my favorite music and send it to me. And what I would do is every day when we went to the school, I would listen to the music, and I would check I would like sort of take notes in my mind of like, there's this inflection and this tone and this thing and that thing, and I would do it every night for months and months, and just continue to do it until I could sing it and vibe with that content as much as I could listening to the song. And I think that really set a foundation for me. One thing I realized is that, like, when I first started writing, I would write these shitty ass gangsta lyrics or something. It was dumb, and I wouldn't rap them. I would I would do the same thing that a lot of people on Rappad tend to do. Is I would send them to somebody, and they would be like, "Oh yeah, it's cool, bro." And then years later, I did something else. I literally just sat down and I rehearsed every line as I wrote it. I had the beat playing, and I would continue to do that until I got through the whole thing. And now, years later, I can actually start to write something without any backing, and I can kind of run through things in my head and then rehearse them. But if I didn't have that initial foundation of learning, like, you have to do the things that interest you. You can't just be interested and pay attention. You also have to apply everything, or it's just like it's like dead weight in your head.
Hmm. Yeah, dude. When I was when I was trying to learn how to rap, it it was kind of funny because, like I said, I couldn't take the time to like sit down and dissect lyrics and flow. So what I did instead is kind of like what you did. I would print out lyrics, um, and like I remember even distinctly, like I remember I printed out some Eminem lyrics once upon a time, and I would turn on that song and I would try to rap it exactly like he could. And I was like, I would just keep doing that until I knew that I could have it packed down. And
Right.
that's how I would study it, by doing it, you know?
Right. Exactly.
Um, and so it's just like, I'm not wasting time. I'm actually learning, I'm applying it. And then like now I know I could do that. So let me move on to something a little different, or, hit it from a different angle, or maybe work on the delivery a little bit more, and just keep going and just keep building from there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
hey, so I'm kind of curious, man. So what what influenced you to rap, or who are your main influences in rap? Because I've always been curious, dude. Like you have a really, in my opinion, a really cool delivery, and it's so smooth. And I want to kind of see what your inspirations were.
So in the center of all of that, I want to say Kendrick and Chance from Acid Rap, 10 Day, and Section 80, and To Pimp a Butterfly, Good Kid, Mad City. Those are all huge pillars in my life. But going back, when I was a kid, so I have my stepdad was a jazz musician, and for whatever reason, it set like a weird found. I didn't like a lot of the shit that he played. He played like freeform stuff when he was practicing. I always got annoyed, but he played with the Toasters. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Toasters. The Toasters are the ska band. They tour the world, and when they came to town, he would play saxophone for them, and he knew a lot of the band members, so they brought me over there, and I fucking loved their music, like ska punk kind of stuff, but really really smooth and tight, like just beautiful fucking music. And then as I got older, I think one of the first ones that I was really obsessed with was Remember the Name by Fort Minor, and
Yes.
I connected with the concept of how they were utilizing melodies and the drums, and it reminded me so much of like a lot of the stuff that my stepdad would play. Like I I want to say I don't want to say Coltrane, because I feel like Kendrick had so much more of a representation, or like he had stake in the game for like saxophone and like really jazzy shit. Like he really loved that. But for Fort Minor, it just seemed like the way that they executed timings on melodies and switches with the drums was so complex, and it seemed so influenced. I didn't know this when I was a kid. So it was literally just like blind, like, God, I really fucking love this. And as I got older, after that, just classic stuff, like not really classic, but the usual thing, 50 Cent, Eminem, like old school Eminem, I was really obsessed with. And then I was gonna say this, as I learned the lyrics of a lot of my favorite stuff, and I would dig into it deeper, it lost its appeal. I don't know if this goes for everybody, but like Eminem and 50 Cent lost their appeal with me. And as I went on, I think the one artist that I've never grown tired of, even though I stop listening every so often, like I'll go a year without listening, I'll come back to it, and I think it's a good thing. It's got to be Kendrick. It's got to be like, even these days, like people like Smino, who have this strange, like it really strikes you. It's almost alien in the way that they can just go and execute these ideas and then tie them together. Like if they do a flow switch, the way that they'll flow switch is just absolutely out of this fucking world. So yeah, for me, definitely those people. As far as like smoothness, I was always struck by Kendrick because he was doing something where he had something important to say, right? And then he would present it in this way that was absolutely impossible to overlook. It just felt like, especially with a song like Backseat Freestyle, he had this background in making strong statements, and not everybody understood them, but I think that bled into, for example, Sing About Me. Sing About Me is one of the heaviest songs that I've ever heard, and it goes for a whole fucking 10 minutes, and you can't get tired of it. You get lost inside of the story. So yeah, having that always in the back of my mind, knowing that it existed, kind of set this bar for me of like, I have to, because I can't say I sound like Kendrick. For a while, I think I wanted to. People say that I sound like Cole a lot more, and Cole's definitely up there for me. But I really wanted to figure out how to execute things in a way that was just impossible to overlook. Because when you hear it, it's just encapsulating, and I'm not fantastic at it. I definitely feel like, because there are always these moments, right, where you make a song and you're like, oh man, this is some of the best shit I've made. I'm in my bag right now. And then you make 4 more songs and you kind of hang at that bar for a little while, and you look back and you're like, man, that shit was corny. I'm just gonna make some new shit.
Super trash.
Yeah. Yeah, and it might not even be like super trash, but there's a thing going on in my mind where it's like, if I don't in the long term feel the same way about my own music that I felt about like Sing About Me, it's not there yet. And that's just kind of how I look at it. And I feel like that's sort of a strange standard to have, because a lot of people are like, bro, just record something and release it. Just make a fucking album. Just do it. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. You make an album and you put it out there and it goes somewhere. That's your legacy now. And you want to think about what your legacy is going to be. Every single one of your actions and decisions are your legacy, but you get this beautiful opportunity, especially if you're young, and you haven't put out a lot and you haven't sort of put yourself out there a lot, to continue to work and continue to mold yourself into this thing that you really want to be. And I feel like a lot of people, they forget about that, and they go, they have like a 10-year strong career of like coming up and then a few years of being on, and then they fall off because the times move past them, and they suddenly, like, their legacy is just neither here nor there. And so that's something that's really intrigued me, is figuring out like what entails a piece of art that can last for decades. And I feel like To Pimp a Butterfly has got to be one of those super unique examples of something that will stand as a landmark in hip hop for a really fucking long time. Even if people don't listen to it like it's Astral World forever, people are still going to be referencing that as like anybody who has knowledge of hip hop, right?
True. Yeah. So true, man. When I think about what makes a timeless record, is it has to tap into our human nature. Like it has to be a subject that every human can relate to. Like
honesty.
Right. Like principles, growing pains, love, hate, emotions. Like, when you start rapping about, oh, I had this Nintendo 64, blah, 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 like that's dope for the moment, if you got a bar about that, but 20 years down the road, nobody knows what that is,
Right.
Hopefully they would, but things change, things evolve. And so, like, I admire Dr. Dre a lot for that, because he's one of those people that makes sure that his music is literally timeless. Like, you can't put a timestamp on it at all. If you listen to any of the Dr. Dre records, you can't necessarily hear a reference that has to do with what's going on at the moment they recorded it.
And you can hear his influence everywhere. You can hear it everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Like
definitely.
Those super tight, high-pitched synth leads with the crazy note switches and the modulation. Like you hear that shit, and almost it's not that it's in every song, it's that you know, it kind of grew out of being like West Coast style, and now it's just it's a way to it's how you say, I look at it as it's like it's a classic trick in the bag now. And there's something really
Oh yeah.
special about being able to develop something that people are going to use and work off of for lifetimes. And I really do believe, because if you think about it, um, it's really hard to track this because you have to go from generation to generation through all the progressions. But if you go back, you'll find out that like Beethoven and Bach, their influences have progressed through everything. They've kind of like one person picked up on it and did something with it, and then somebody else picked up on that and did something with it, and so on and so forth until it became something that you can barely even recognize. But the fact is that those influences are still buried deep inside of that, and I think that's always going to apply because back then it's not as if you had the internet and everybody wanted to be a composer, but you can imagine that there were composers and singers and people all across the world who were doing that kind of stuff, but there were only a few people who made something that lasted. And so there is an art to that. It's not about showing up at the right time to do the right thing necessarily. It's about also having the knowledge and applying it again, which is just such a I want to say arbitrary, but it's more like convoluted, only because we live in the age that we do.
Dude, that's so true. Talk about it, man. For real. Man, it's crazy too though. Like I really like everything you said. Actually, man, I feel like me and you have a lot more in common than we really knew. Like I'm really glad we're having this conversation, man.
Me too.
It's actually really quite funny because when I'm circling back now. When you mentioned Fort Minor, that was literally, well, it wasn't Fort Minor itself, but it was Mike Shinoda that really helped influence a lot of um, me wanting to even rap. Period.
Mm.
Um, Man, I see the way that I came up, dude. I think it's a very interesting story. It's very hard to relate to other people because of my story, but I came from Mexico, living in the border of the United States. You know, literally 10 minutes away from the border, I could see the United States anytime I went to school,
Wow.
just across the fence.
Wow.
Um, but because of that, I'm already living in this very unique, diverse city where, yes, it's Mexico and we hold all of our traditions and our Mexican laws and everything, but we are very influenced by what's happening in the United States. Um, so I grew up listening to a lot of like my dad was heavy on rock music, so he would listen to like the Beatles, things like that.
Okay.
He was very much into that, and my mom, she's um, she herself is a very talented musician. She plays piano, plays flute, plays guitar. Like she just gets into whatever has to do with music. So I kind of grew up within music. My dad being a huge music lover, I kind of ended up listening to a lot of rock early on in my life, and I loved it.
Mm.
Um, but and so that's where my story is a little funky because I never thought I would rap in my life. I didn't even know it was a thing back then. Um, but it's funny because apparently my dad tells me that when oh man, I'm showing my age here. When when Vanilla Ice came out with Ice Ice Baby, they told me that I was sitting there trying to spin on the floor, and I mean I don't remember that, but they're sitting there talking about how I'm trying to break dance to this hip hop song that I heard for the first time ever, and it's just like it's funny to me because it sounds like hip hop is already in me. Um,
Mm.
and hip hop isn't necessarily just the music. I consider it a culture. I consider it my culture, no matter what my ethnicity or background is.
Mm.
Um, so anyway, kind of fast forwarding, I ended up moving to the United States early on in my childhood, and um, I remember very distinctly there was a lot of talk about Biggie and Tupac because Pac had just recently passed away at that time. And so The conspiracy theories are already out there with all the school kids. Nah, Pac is still alive, this and that. And you could still hear Biggie and Tupac bumping down the road every day. And so that was like my first real introduction to like, this is rap? Okay, like that's kind of cool. And I really vibe with it, but I didn't pay too much attention to it. I just knew that it was like a thing, you know?
Mm.
Um, but then I remember like turning on the TV, and like MTV had the show called TRL where they would show like the top 10 music videos, and rap started to take over that. And I remember watching people like Lil Wayne being on the charts, and that was before he's what we know him as today. Like that was when he was like running around with this little I forgot what the crew was called. I think it's called Hot Boys. Um, and Southern rap in itself wasn't very prominent at that time either. So you hear Lil Wayne with the Hot Boys for the first time, and it sounds like absolute trash compared to everything else. And so I would sit there and just like make fun of this dude. Like, what is he saying? You can't understand him. Like, he's kind of got a little flow, but rap is whack. This is stupid. I could do that, you know? And that's funny enough, ironically enough, that's kind of what got me started in rap. I was like
Mm.
really making fun of these dudes, and I'm like, let me just try it. Let me see if I could do it too, you know? Um, and so I would like write my own lyrics and stuff, but because I wasn't taking it too seriously, I kind of just ended up leaving it. And instead, I kind of went back towards my influence with rock, and I started to learn how to play guitar and all that. And it was around that era where Linkin Park was really popping. And there's a song called High Voltage that when I heard it, it was like a light switch. I'm like, I gotta rap. I have to rap. This is crazy. Like
Mm.
just hearing his whole flow, his cadence. I didn't understand what he was saying, but it sounded dope, you know?
Mm.
He said, I put a kink in the backbones of clones of microphones, never satisfy my rhyme Jones. Spraying bright day over what you might say. My blood type's Krylon, Technicolor type A. Like, how do you come up with this? Like,
Whoa,
I
that
could
just
do,
made
I'm gonna
something
try to do
click.
that.
I didn't even realize because you're talking about influences in rap that don't necessarily come from like the umbrella of hip hop. Like we all kind of considered Linkin Park to be rock. Um,
Exactly. And so did I. Till I heard that song, and I'm like, Mike can rap.
Damn.
Like, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's wild because that makes me realize I grew up listening to the Gorillas,
Hmm.
but I never thought about it like I grew up listening to rap. Like the Gorillas were playing in the car like quite a lot. And I always kind of
Hmm.
ask myself like did I really just like go from jazz to Fort Minor? Like was that it? Cuz I always think like there's got to be something deeper in there, and for whatever reason, that just never clicked in my head. Um, because the Gorillas had some of the most unique and strange flows and bars that I had ever heard, and they were so melodic. I feel like they were probably some of the first melodic rappers that I can
Hmm.
think of that were like actually rapping over these very sort of spacey chords and doing like very how you say it's not like dance music, but it's almost like dance music. It's hard to describe. But I think
Hmm.
it's interesting. You bring up Linkin Park. I think that for the modern age, it's fusion. It's fusion that really made me realize like, oh, this is never going to stop evolving and getting cooler. And when I realized that, I realized like I could do this shit for a lifetime and I won't run out of things that I want to be doing because there's always going to be something new to try, which is just it's a mind-blowing realization, really.
It is, man. Like, I kind of had like that same realization. Like, I still can't believe that I really started rapping because of rock, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, even listening to Linkin Park, I wasn't looking for the rap. It was just in there. you know?
Yeah.
It was just like kind of in the middle. Not even in every song. It's like maybe one song had one rap verse or whatever it was. But it's just like after that, I felt like I could pay attention because I liked it all of a sudden.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, this is cool. And then, I started like digging around, like, all right, what's out there? Let me just explore to see if anyone's as good as this guy because he's super dope or whatever. And like, and sure enough, man, you start bumping into the Wu-Tangs, you start bumping into the Jay-Z's and Eminems,
Yep.
and you're just like, okay, all right, this is a real thing, and people are really good at it, and I think it's dope, and I'm gonna try it out. Um, and it's funny because like I used to make my own songs with my guitar, learning how to play the guitar. I was trying to make my own songs and I thought it was so cool, but for some reason my lyrics always rhymed because it's a common pattern in even rock music, but I started noticing that they were becoming less and less melodic and more like rap. So I kind of just shed the guitar and I just started rapping and rapping and rapping. Um, so yeah, like the journey as an artist is definitely crazy. Um, and then looping back to what I said earlier, like, dude, you got to be open-minded and flexible and willing to try out new things. Otherwise, you're just stuck. Like, what are you doing at all,
Right. Right. And I think the real crux for a lot of people is got to be, again, going back to the beginning of what we were talking about, that when you come into this world, there are people everywhere trying to tell you what the checklist is and what you're going to have to do in order to make it. And when you're talking about open-minded and flexibility, I feel like a lot of people are like, well, you got to be open-minded and flexible to do things you don't want to do. And more so in the context of like doing things that don't really sort of pertain to you at all. Whereas to me, open-minded really means like you have to be willing to just get outside of your box. You have to be willing to destroy yourself. You have to be willing to really challenge yourself. Like, am I good at what I'm doing? Is there more that I could be doing? Could I be doing it in a different way? Which is something that I feel like a lot of people, they don't consider that part. They think either it's going to be, I'm going to rap plain and simple, or I'm going to do something entirely different. And in the modern age, it's so much more complex that, you might find out that as a rapper, 10 years down the line or 2 years down the line or whatever it is, you're going to discover a totally new, I don't know, niche or genre that you connect with, that then suddenly you want to make that a part of your sound. And then suddenly that's what ties it all in together. And that's where you pop off. But if you're not open-minded at all and you're just barreling down on like, I have to do this one thing, it's just not, it's not gonna, how you say, it's not gonna develop a life of its own, which is, I think, what's really important as an artist, is being willing to see things develop a life of their own, and in a way being willing to kill them off and try something new, which I think it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to, because in the beginning I didn't like the idea of deleting my music. It was very depressing. Right?
Yeah.
But after a while, I've grown to embrace that. Like, fuck this. I can make something better. I don't need this on my plate right now. I could even take the concepts and apply them to something different. But it's so much more refreshing to, like, if you drop an anchor into the world and you don't, like, you find out that anchor is in the wrong place, pull that motherfucker up. And I think
sure.
That's really what it comes down to for a lot of people. And also, like, in a way, being willing to do what you don't want to do really applies as well, but more so to me in the sense of, like, there are going to be things that seem too difficult. And when you come up to something that seems like it's too difficult, that's going to be the exact thing that's going to, like, turn you into, how you say, the bigger image or the higher image of yourself. And you're never going to stop there either. Like, you're going to learn something, you're going to grow as a person, and you're going to realize you got somewhere else to go. but you have to be willing to climb a mountain. And a lot of people, they don't want to climb the mountain. They want to go around it, but they're never going to get any kudos for walking around the mountain because people want to know who the fuck summited that thing. And that's really what it comes down to. Like, if you look up Mount Everest on Wikipedia, there are lists of the people who climbed that motherfucker, not the list of people who went to Nepal and looked at it. And that's real.
That's true. That's real. That's super real, man. That I live by that too, man. There's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts in life. No matter how many shortcuts you take, you're gonna end up back on the hard road. And if you take a shortcut for that, you're gonna end up on the hard road again. So just take the road, man. Take the hard road. Get through it. You're gonna learn a lot quicker and faster than anybody else, and you'll be satisfied with what, your trials and errors and your successes. And you're gonna learn to appreciate the errors and the trials because, dude, like the people that block those things out, man, they got a tough time ahead. It's you just got to embrace whatever comes your way.
I look at that skill as parallel to taking a cold shower. If you can step into that cold ass water and do it for at least a few minutes, that's the exact same skill that you'll be using to go and do these things that seem so hard. And I think, because I don't know if you've ever heard of Wim Hof, but this is now a thing. Like, taking cold showers and doing certain breathing exercises will drastically improve your life. And I really do believe that's why. Because when you can find something simple to use as a practice to build that skill of being willing to do things that you really don't want to do, then you're gonna blaze through life. And that's going to feel fucking amazing. A lot of people will talk about that feeling that they had like a year where they were really on fire and they did this thing and that thing and they fucked that girl and they met that guy, and then after that they got so caught up in their excitement and the awe of it that they've totally forgot about what got them there in the first place, which would be exactly that, being willing to go outside of the box. It's a fucking rabbit hole.
The box is dangerous. The box is dangerous on every level.
It is, man. That's why you just stretch out your arms and lift that shit up. That's really what it comes down to.
Straight up. So
we actually got through the first two questions without me having to ask at all, which is fucking dope. Because that was a beautiful conversation, and I wanted to ask you about yourself as an artist. And I want to ask first, like, out of everything, all the way from when you sort of dropped the guitar and were like, okay, I'm rapping now, all the way to now, what do you think maybe your highest moment or your most exciting moment or the most gratifying would be for you?
Oh, man. All right. That's a little hard to explain, but if I root it back to something I said earlier, it might make more sense. I really do live my life. Hip hop is my culture, man. It just is, and so it's a way of thinking. It's a progressive. It's progressive. It's putting things into action. It's not all talk. It's not all rap. You got to act too. It's visual arts. It's the way you portray yourself. It's always being innovative. And so when you put all that into perspective, as far as like what hip hop culture is, and you shed the labels, like rapping is one of the labels and graffiti is one of the labels, like, no, like these are all things that move and stimulate your mind and give you information. It's all a process. It's all a practice. It's all a discipline. And so for me, the highest point has always been the process. Just getting down to the actual writing the rhymes. I'm a technical dude. Like I enjoy that process. Once I put it out, it's out. I don't know what's going to happen to that. I don't know if it's going to make sense to anyone or not. And just like any other artist, I'm always going to look back and say, oh, that was mega trash. I could do better. But it's the process for me, man. And I think that's unfortunately why I'm a little inconsistent when it comes to putting stuff out. But for me, it's all about how does this feel? And it's all about the process. I really enjoy writing rhymes, you know? I
Hmm.
enjoy finding similes. I enjoy switching up the flow from one bar to the next. Like, I really love the craft. Um, so when we're talking about high points, that's my personal high point. But if we're looking at it from like a different perspectives, like let's say, um, I don't know, streams or attention or whatever else is out there to gauge it by, um, it's just hard to say, man. Like I've had so many different phases in rap itself. Like when I started rapping, dude, it was on paper,
Hmm.
and I I started trying to freestyle a lot. And this is the cool part actually. I've learned so much about my process um, later on in life that I didn't realize I was doing. But back then when I was learning what rap was, you know, sometimes you could see like or you could like tune into the radio and hear like they had an hour where they would have people freestyling stuff. Um, and so you think like, man, people can really do that on the spot. That's crazy. And so, and then you look at the videos, music videos, and just like the CDs that are coming out, and you just you look at how much talent is out there, and then you're like, man, I got to be able to be on par with them. Like
Hmm.
I compare myself to them, and I'm trash now, so I got to get myself to that level. So I would practice freestyle, 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 freestyle. Um, and didn't realize that, you know, even just a few years ago, I barely just realized that people memorize these verses and call it a freestyle. I really thought it was always off the dome. So here I
Right.
am practicing this insane discipline that no one's really putting into practice. So to me, it was a high point to be able to freestyle off the top of the dome in front of anybody.
Hmm.
Um, and then, you know, from there you take it to um, when I first recorded my first tracks and stuff like that. Like, oh man, that was a crazy process in itself. My first songs, man, which I've lost by the way. I have, you know, old hard drives, computer goes bad, whatever. But man, I recorded on one of these really old microphones, computer microphones. It was like those big old sticks, and it was like broken in half.
Hmm.
It was just dangling by the cords, and I was using Windows Sound Recorder, and, and I would like, I don't even know how I did it, but I would just like try to mash sounds together, and like I would rap over that, and you could barely understand or hear anything. But like that was the high point for me to know that I could do that for myself. Um, and and then, man, so also once I started realizing that I was getting pretty good at it, and like even out in school or whatever, we would have our little ciphers. Um, and like I just felt like I was doing a pretty good job until I started browsing the internet and for you know going to like different rap forums and realizing I was super trash because now I'm looking at talent from all over the world,
Hmm.
not just my neighborhood, you know.
Right.
And it's just like damn. So starting the battle there in those forums and realizing how bad I was and getting beat like every time I battled anybody was not only humbling, but it forced me to really up my skill. Um, and then another high point for me is being able to beat those battlers after all those failures, you know? And I don't know how many people were invested in the battle, but that meant a lot to me, you know?
Right.
Um, so that like that was a high point for me. And I think once I hopped into Rappad, which was many years later, it was kind of like going back to the same thing. It kind of like sparked so much nostalgia in me. I'm like, man, they still doing this? Let me give it a shot. Let me jump in here. And it was cool because it kind of felt like being on the block, but it's on the internet. Like it's just this this group of people that's always there, and you could whatever, and it, I mean, some people got butthurt or whatever, but like it wasn't really about that. Like me and you were talking right now, just because we battled doesn't mean anything. It's for the craft, you know.
Right.
Um, and so once I got into Rappad, from the streams perspective, that's been my high point. I've never had streams like that before.
Mm.
Um, but you know, again, to me, it didn't come down to the streams. It came to like, damn, this feels good. For me, it was just like, man, like I'm really engaged in the art again, and it felt good, and I'm learning all these new techniques I would have never thought about.
Mm.
The mix, like honestly, like the way that I view myself, I feel like I'm that raw material that's never been used or refined properly. Like I just want to rap, like I just want to do it, you know.
Right.
Um, so it was really dope to just like see a community of people doing the same thing that I'm doing, but literally and technically trying to get better. And it's just like, all right, this is dope. So that's a high point personally for me, and also as far as streams and attentions, it's been a pretty good high point. Um, there's been other high points where like I used to like back in the day, I used to like make my own little mixtapes and sell them around in high school and stuff like that, and that felt dope to me, and people knew me for that, and it felt good and great to share my art. But I don't know how far that really took me, because you know nothing's getting counted. There's no streams getting counted. Like people grow up, we move away. I don't know what it came down to. Like it was dope at the moment, you know.
I can personally speak on that too, because when I started rapping, before I ever found Rappad, because I joined Rappad when I moved back to the city, or when I moved to this city, and a whole bunch of personal shit happened. I was rapping with my friends. Like the whole way that I started was I went, so I got out of that whole situation where I had lost my freedom, and I'd spent quite a lot of time like towards the end finally writing my own stuff, because they like I had good behaviors, so they let me have like pencils and all kinds of shit. Like normally you can't actually hold any of that. So I got lucky to practice it a little bit, and when I went to the town that I went to and I went back to school, there were these kids. One of them had the same name as me, and he was actually out of high school, and they would all smoke weed, and I was a stoner. So that's actually how I ended up hanging out with them, was that I was from the city. I didn't really get along with all these suburban kids. They all seemed like they were from the city. And then when they all came over to my house, they all freestyled. And so like I want to say 6 months, not even, just some time after that, I eventually got a microphone, and I told myself, like, I didn't know that I was going to rap. I was like, I might use this to make videos. I might do voiceovers. I might use this to let my other friends rap. But I had an AT-2020, and I just kind of sat there, and I wrote something out. And I started making this music, and I would show it to the people at school. And a lot of them would kind of like repeat my lyrics back to me. Like at one point, I talked a lot about weed, and these suburban kids don't know shit about weed. So people would walk up to me every day and be like, "Yo, so are you a dealer or not?" And I'm like, "No," and they all thought I was lying. So that was really frustrating. And my friends would play my shit on the lunch table. It only happened a few times, but I remember the few times it happened, like people got up onto the table and started dancing, and it felt good. But years later, there's like one or two people from that era that are still around. But yeah, I didn't think about that at that point. There was that fantastical part of my mind that was thinking like, oh, I'm going to blow up in the high school, and then all the other high schools in Connecticut are going to find out about me, and none of that shit happened. It barely happens. It's like you got to be Tentacion. You got to have dropped like Riot or Look at Me for people to really be fucking with you on that level. And that's a really rare thing, but it's worth it for the experience. Because like I said, there's only like one or two people that occasionally check in on my music. Like occasionally, like once every 4 or 5 months, I see one of them like a post or leave a comment or something or hit me up. So yeah, I think it's important take it so like personally or seriously. I've always been a fan of like drawing a line between what's serious and what's sincere. And I don't believe in being serious. I do believe in being sincere. It's just that it's hard to, like, the word sincere for whatever reason is a fucking mouthful. I feel like people just don't use it that much. But to me, when people say don't be so serious, that doesn't mean don't be sincere. It just means like don't be so invested in how things are going to turn out right now and just let them happen. So yeah, I like, there was a lot that you said that I wanted to touch on, which is like, you know, I'm trying to search through my mind, but there were also other things that I ended up honing in on more. Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about the roots of hip hop, because you were talking about the essence of it, right? Like what is hip hop? What does it mean? And a lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't know what hip hop started out as. What really set me off was watching the Get Down, and then going and listening to people like Flash talk, and seeing their interviews and sort of like trying to get their story. And you realize that it really is a lot like how they portray it in the Get Down, that outside, like, I think there's some sort of irony of them. Back then, it was just break beats. And the whole concept of, like, doing a hip-hop event in New York was really a break from life. And you had security. There was no fighting. You couldn't bring a gun. It wasn't anything like the outside. It was a totally different vibe. And it was really, it seemed to me like it was an opportunity for people to focus their energy in a fun way, in a positive way that would cause them to grow and really like be inspired. It was meant to be inspiring. I think it was always meant to be sort of like a beacon of hope. And people don't realize that. Like now you have songs like Look at Me that blow up, and I fuck with the flow of that song, but the lyricism, the vibe doesn't really entail to me what hip hop was originally for, which was to be a statement about the world rather than a personal statement. It's meant to be a statement about like, this is what we're going through, this is what we're doing about it, and this is our message to the rest of the world. And a lot of it's not something that you find so pervasively. Like, you have people now that are still around doing it, like Black Thought. Black Thought is still, he's still 100% in his roots. He's still 100% who he is. People like Madlib, people like Freddie Gibbs, they make like real raw content. It's really about what actually happened. And I think, well, we all know this. There's a whole section of people who want to talk about what they think is cool. It's not just about making money. I don't think it started as something to make money off of. I think it makes money because it's cool. Because we have this tendency as a society to focus on what we think really makes us feel powerful. And we don't understand power. So as the years have gone on and popular culture has really gotten its hands on hip hop, it's been about power rather than being about honesty. And so anybody who talks about power in the most grandiose way, with the most bravado and the most confidence, tends to hit. But there's still, like, it's weird. I feel like over the years, as we're aging as a global society, because we haven't been a global society like we have with the internet before. This is all new. Like, being intertwined over these devices is new. So we're starting to grow together. I've noticed that because of the internet, a lot of people actually regressed. And then there's a lot of other people who have learned from it, and it's almost like we're finding this space where we all have more or less the same understanding of how to navigate life. And it's up to now, and probably for a long time going forward, that's going to be a problem, because people will need to learn the difference between bullshit and reality. But I think the desire for reality is there, and it's real, and people are just trying to figure it out. And what hip-hop was built on, the reason that it's so popular and pervasive, I think that's why. I think that's why it's going to last for so long, because hip-hop isn't a musical genre. It's it's a vibe, it's a culture, and it takes from anything. It plugs in anything, and that's why it's going to go almost anywhere. And I feel like electronic music is something similar as well, and that's why they're so deeply intertwined, and sometimes you can't even tell the difference between a hip hop song and an electronic song, because they'll be using the same kinds of instruments or the same kinds of techniques. Yeah, it's
Yeah, that's true, man. It's really, really. I'm really glad that you brought it back to that, because there's so much to get into when it comes to hip hop being a culture. Um, it kind of serves a lot of our primal instincts as well. Like, um, although we know hip hop is not about the money and the flash and the cars, inevitably, when you think about just humans in general, right?
mm,
The man's got to appeal to the woman if he wants to have seeds, right? Or children.
right.
Um, and so when you think about where hip hop really comes from, and you're talking about a place where there's so much oppression, the economy's crazy bad, drugs are being sold everywhere, your baby mom is doing this and that, people are falling dead in the streets because of the drugs, the police keeps coming after you, they're it's a mess. So when you're living in that environment, you're willing to do whatever it takes to meet your needs, period. So if it means that you got to woo somebody so that you can be with somebody, like, you got to do what you got to do, right?
mm,
um it also, comes down to, like you said, when you want to move away from all the negativity, find a space to where it's a community thing. It's almost like a tribe, where we have this ritual of, like, let me tell you a story and I'm gonna do it with a rhyme so it sounds fun to listen to. Um, the whole thing when it comes to the break beats, it comes down to, like, we like the song, but we really love that little part of the song. So let's just play it over and over and over and over, and we're gonna vibe to it. It's just it's all about breaking free from the monotony, the negativity, and that's also why, um, I call it a culture of innovation, because you're literally trying to build from nothing. You know, we're making music off of what wasn't considered instruments. Now a turntable is considered an instrument. You
mm,
create that. Um, you turn a story into a song. Like, we turn acrobatics into dance moves, and then we use different cultural influences to uplift that culture of dance or breakdancing. Um, so many salsa moves and breakdancing, and you would never know it because it just looks like breakdancing now,
right.
Um, and so it is very much more a culture than anything else. And in fact, like I said, because it is about innovation, this is where a lot of old school heads get the hate, you know. Say, oh, you're an old head. You don't want to listen to these new kids, this and that. It's not that the new kids are bad. A lot of them are extremely talented, but hip hop has always been anti. Oh, sorry, I'm thinking in Spanish. Um, Anti-conformist, is that a word? Um,
Yeah.
that you're not willing to just sit around and crumble with your environment. You're going to get up and do something, right? So when you start seeing mainstream media doing the same thing over and over and over, we are not willing to be stuck to that. We want to innovate. And so there's a lot of new kids that are doing a lot of innovation, but there's a lot of them doing a whole lot of copy and paste. So it's the copy and paste part that is just like, yeah, you're doing that for the music and the money, but you're not really part of our culture. Like, that's cool, do you, but we're different. We're a different breed. We're cut from a different cloth. It's not bad, it's not negative. It's just the distinction in culture.
I respect that. I respect that, and I think that that's something that people don't wrap their minds around because they take it so personally. A
Right.
lot of artists really do take that personally. They're like, oh, you don't fuck with me, I'm not good enough. It's not about whether or not you're good. It's about whether or not you honor what this is all built on. And if you want to do your thing and you want to how you say it, it's called appropriation. It's just that I don't think it's that
Yeah.
serious that it needs to, like, in a lot of cases. There's the case of suburbia sort of ripping off the hood. I call that like blatant appropriation. But then there's also the case of artists who make hip hop music that's in the spirit of making money, which I would also call a form of appropriation. It's not quite as serious to me, only because it's somebody who's trying to make their way, and there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't, and I respect anybody who wants to make whatever they want to make. If it's not about being honest for them and it's about making money and they're good at doing what they do, they're gonna be successful, and I bless them for that. But me personally, I want to find a way to respect the culture, to understand the culture, plug that into my music, and then on top of that, turn it into something marketable, which is, in my opinion, far more difficult but far more gratifying, and it can last for a lifetime. It can get passed down to your kids, whereas I almost feel like people who do this so that they can meet the standards of today's society, whether it be being a badass and having a dope car or having a fine woman or whatever it may be, society rolls over them eventually. The vibe changes, and if they don't have the skills to move with that, then they get left behind. And it just says something about the longevity of, like, if you can understand the roots of what people love and then you can apply that, you're going to be able to move with that wherever it goes. Whereas if you just understand that you want something and you can do this thing to get it, that's all it's going to amount to, is like it's then and done, and that's it. And people don't
Right.
really think about that because it's like a rapper who gets the offer for an advance and they don't put any thought into it at all. They're like, I want that right now. Just give it to me. And then 5 years later, they realize that was a terribly misinformed decision. And to me, that's directly parallel to the way a lot of people sort of decide on what they're going to do in their lives.
Yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. Yeah, and I mean, I want to make it clear, like I said, there's nothing personal specifically from me. I have nothing against anybody's hustle. I
Mm.
can't knock anybody's hustle. You got to do what you got to do to survive. You got to meet your needs. So if the music business is your route and your means to survive, do that. That's dope. You just might not fit into my culture, but you got to do what you got to do. That's dope. Um, and looping back to what, I don't know, kind of seems like a theme here so far, but looping back to flexibility and open-mindedness. Like, if hip hop's about innovation, you're supposed to actually look into like these innovations that the new kids are coming up with, you know? So you're supposed to embrace, love, and be able to feed their growth, but you got to know who's really for the culture and who's really not. And it's like you said, it's not a topic that's so like um it's there's not so much weight on it necessarily. I mean, things evolve, things change, things got to move on. But when you're talking about hip hop as a culture, we are a tribe. And so when you appropriate a tribe's culture and use it for something else, that's when it stings a little bit. But, you know, you got to do you. Go do your stuff, you know?
Mm. No, I completely agree. Um, so we're 1 hour and 15 minutes in. So we're gonna try to blast through a few questions. I got one for you from Rappad. Uh, Shout out to Isaac. He wants to know, how has your battle
Ha.
how has your battle rap influenced your musical ability when you make a song?
Oh, no, that's a really good question. I actually struggle with that quite a bit. I'm not gonna lie. It's really funny because like sometimes when I'm writing a song that has like so much meaning or like I really want to put a statement out there, um, battle rap is good to help me in making very bold statements, but it sucks sometimes because, like, let's say I'm writing an emotional song and I'm trying to share, like, I don't know, let's just say sadness, right? If I'm trying to share with you how sad I am, eventually, as I'm writing that verse, somewhere down the verse, it starts turning into aggression and it starts turning into a battle verse. and I got to cut it in half. I'm like, yo, no, stop. And so I struggle with that. So it's battling has helped me with making statements. And I'll tell you a lot deeper here. Again, hip hop being a culture, rapping and battling has helped me with day-to-day things like how to communicate very specific things to people, how to present concepts, how to debunk theories. Those are things you do during battle rap, and you just don't notice it until you apply it to your everyday life.
I
So,
love that.
but as far as like, yeah, like straight up, dude. I mean, music itself can do that for you when you learn how to flow and how to keep things on beat. You got to do the same thing for life,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You got to do things at appropriate times, and you got to do things in a flow. You can't force it, but you got to learn along the way. The same thing, you know?
Well, have you ever heard anybody say that rhythm is melody slowed down?
I haven't, but that rings true to my ears, you know?
Right. And just in general, so if rhythm is melody slowed down and melody is just frequency and frequency is just a consistent vibration, everything is rhythm. So life
Yep,
itself is
everything.
just all these different rhythms sort of interplaying into each other. And if you can understand, that concept for hip hop or anything else, you gain the ability to sort of, I want to call it catching a vibe. I don't know if there's really a good word for this, but it's like it's getting into the flow, it's getting into the zen state. And one thing that people don't talk about is like polyrhythms and things like that, and flow switches, and the way that you can sort of transition from one state to the next. And that's something that hip hop will teach you, which I think really really does apply to life, is being able to lie in the offbeat when you need to, and being able to switch things up so they stay fresh, both for you and for the people around you. And that's really important. But I digress. Keep going.
No, that's true. That's true, man. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, I think about even when you rap, you practice things like breath control, flow, when to spit quick, when to slow it down, things like that. And the same thing goes for what you say in real life. Like you have to know when to speak up, and you gotta know when to be quiet, and you gotta know when to say things. Like it's just you can apply any skill to literally anything in your life. That's all I gotta say about that. But sorry, I did kind of like go on a tangent there. To go back to the question, um, battling helped me to understand how to use similes a lot, and some of those poetic. Sorry, man, I'm losing my English here. I'm still thinking in Spanish. But just poetic devices, I guess, right? Um,
Mm.
and when you make a song outside of battle rap, being able to use similes and metaphors is huge to paint pictures. You gotta paint a picture. Um, I think it's very important to put imagery in people's minds when they're listening to something. It's not just about how it sounds, but if they were to listen to your words, where does it take you? You know.
Mm.
So I think that's where battle rap has helped me as far as songwriting, but it is a struggle. I'll fully admit it, and I'll be working on that every time that I'm writing a verse. My verses always turn into battle raps, and I always got to scrap it.
I hear you. And I personally, I think we all have a similar tendency. It's just about like what have you done in the past, and then your muscle memory is going to be remembering that anytime you go to do something. So like I have a tendency to like it's not necessarily that I don't care about the lyrics. I just have a tendency to just worry about flow. And then when I look back at it, I'm like, I wanted to say something much stronger here. And I'll find myself just being like, you know what, fuck this. Because then again, I still have the flow. I still have the tonality of it. I still have the idea. And I can, if I find another beat that really resonates with me, that'll pop right out. And then I can just apply new lyrics to that same idea.
Straight up.
Yeah. And it's I think, it's just kind of difficult to sort of like be your own worst enemy. And that I feel like for everybody who's willing to get somewhere and is really sort of invested in their ability, that they are their worst enemy, like across the board. Like if you listen to Kendrick talk, he'll talk about how he's definitely his biggest adversary, that when he's on tour he treats himself like shit, and he'll sit around and he'll get into this specific vibe because he has to go at his shows a very certain way, and he knows exactly how to elicit that emotion, and it's not fun, but it's exactly what he has to do. And that's an example of like somebody who knows that they're always going to be the person that's in their own way, and then understands like, so I got to use this to my advantage no matter how painful it is, which is something that I feel like it's hard to do, because it's almost like everybody wants to escape pain. I was talking to a friend about this recently, about how the sun keeps itself lit, right? And it also burns itself in a literal way. And for anybody who's trying to shine, I see the same thing happening, is that if they're really able to keep themselves going, they burn themselves, and it hurts like fucking hell, because humans just happen to feel things. The sun doesn't feel what it's doing because it doesn't have a nervous system, but we have nervous systems, and our nervous systems are willing to give us a feeling for all of our thoughts, which is just, it's a lot to take in. But I really do believe that it's essential to anybody who wants to navigate life in a conscious way, so that they can get the result that they're going for. And it's not even that cut and dry.
That's real.
Yeah, it's hard.
No, that's super real, man. Like, I was having this conversation yesterday, actually. And I told them straight up, like, man, I literally tell myself I am the worst at everything in order to fuel my competitive side to be better than I've ever been. And it's a day-to-day thing. And it's literally for everything, whether I'm at work or whether I'm rapping or whether I'm playing soccer, whatever it is that I'm doing, I always tell myself, I'm the worst. They're all the best. I need to get to that level. Even if I'm the best, I'm telling myself I'm the worst to make sure I don't get into this comfort zone of, I'm the best, I don't got to try anymore. Like that'll never work for me specifically.
Yeah, I completely vibe with that. It's different for everybody too. Like personally, one thing that always resonated with me was the concept of always being, what was it? I forget who said this. It might have been Alan Watts or somebody along those lines, who talked about how if the world is your worst enemy, what happens when you win? Right? And if you're your worst enemy, what happens when you win? You're still here. And then you can, go back to battle and continue improving. So for me, I'm always at war with where I was yesterday. That I want to one up myself, which it's hard because there's a part of your mind that really wants to focus on like what would be cool to do and what would be like really exciting to see from yourself. Whereas if you can one up yourself on every level, whether it's cleaning your house or making yourself some tea, the way you do it, like maybe it takes you a certain amount of time to do something, you want to do it in 1 minute, and you go for that goal, you sort of build on the simple shit as well as the complex stuff. That's what really causes the exponential improvement. What is the word for it? exponential gains is what it's called. Is that if you get 1% better every day, you're 1% better than the day before. So now you're actually building on a larger sample size, so that the more and more you do that, the faster you grow.
Yeah, straight up. Hell yeah, I believe in that.
So here's a question. When you started, where did you see yourself going? Like, what was your goal? If you like, even because I also want you to tap into that like fantastical part of your mind that was like, I'm gonna stand up on a stadium in front of 20,000 or whatever it may have been. But I want to know, like, where did you see yourself taking it at that time?
Oh man, great question. Um, my goals were not very ambitious to begin with. I just wanted to be as good or better than those that surrounded me at the moment.
Hmm.
And once I got really good at that and actually surpassed that, um, I told myself, I'm like, I could really make a living out of this, I think. And I would love it because I love to rap. I just, it's my thing. Like people see me, and this is the part that sucks sometimes, but even like people that know me, they see me as the rapper. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, well, might as well. I'm gonna run with it. And I imagine myself being able to have my own either label or some sort of organization to help build up artistry. Um,
Go ahead, you got it.
I, I'm one to shy away from the spotlight. So like I wanted to be able to do things in the background and help others that have that, that social persona, that the people that can be on stage and do all that. Um, I wanted to be behind the scenes and like build all that. But as far as an artist, I told myself in order to get to that end goal of helping others get there, like I got to go through it myself too. So kind of my goal was like I'm gonna make mixtapes, I'm gonna make EPs, I'm gonna make an album, um, and I'm gonna really build my own infrastructure, similar to kind of what we see J. Cole has done with Dreamville, TDE, things like that. I really did have a very similar mission, and it was really cool to see how they were emerging at the same time that I had that same mindset. So I'm like, oh, this is possible.
Hmm.
We can make this happen. Um, so yeah, like I started doing music videos and like trying to make mixtapes and stuff like that. Um, Time kind of caught up with me. Like I said in the beginning, I needed to refocus on some of life's priorities outside of the craft and that goal. But that kind of was the end goal, and hopefully I can stick to it moving forward. Um, but yeah, like honestly, like I've always wanted to be able to woo the crowd as long as we're on the block or at the school or whatever, win the battle or be the dopest in the cipher. But I never really cared about being on the stage. I wanted to do it to try it, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm a pessimist in that aspect, but I just really love the craft and I don't really care too much about the spotlight.
I hear you, and I think again, everybody has their niche in life, and not see. This is the thing. I saw a friend not too long ago talking about. I haven't seen anybody go off on a tangent like this in a long time. He was talking about how I wish everybody could just be famous and get all the cars and the money, so they would realize that's not what they really want. And nobody really wants that. And there's part of me that just wanted to be like, yeah, kinda. The truth is that there's always going to be a top, and there's always going to be people who really want to go there, and the ones who have the drive, the ones who want it most are going to end up there. And I feel like not everybody wants that. There are a lot of people who convince themselves that they want it because they think that it would be cool, and then they don't consider what it would be like. And I had a run-in with that concept when I was I 18? No, I was 17. When I traveled to Florida going back to my hometown for the first time, and my mother recorded this man playing piano. His name was Donald Gould, and we raised a bunch of money for him. It went viral. The video actually got my old channel got hacked, and it got taken down in December of last year. I think it got taken down at 39 million. And when I came back home, so she gave me the video and was basically like, you have the internet experience, so I'm going to let you do this. And so I was taking calls. I was like taking calls from the news agencies. And I remember there was one point where we were talking to his son, and people were like name dropping me and my mother. And when I was in the hospital, this is what really struck me and made me feel like, Jesus Christ, if I ever make it to where I think I'm gonna go, it's gonna be something like this. I was in the hospital for surgery, and I had just come out, and there were these news corporations calling me like I wasn't even a human being, and they were just like, yeah, whatever you're doing, like, we need to talk to you right now, we need to know this information and that information, we need to know right now. And I remember thinking, like, there's no consideration when you're a commodity, or you're involved with somebody who's a commodity. There's no consideration for your humanity anymore. All people care about is the product. And that's, to me, that's what being famous is really like, is that you become a product, and you have to find, like, you look at people like Kendrick and Cole, you find that they find balances, right? They find a balance between being who they are and then also being a product or a commodity or somebody popular. But you have to understand that, and a lot of people don't want that shit. They do not want the smoke, because that's real fucking smoke.
Yeah, you just tapped into exactly why I don't care about the spotlight. Like, I've realized that I myself am the product at all times and in all angles. Like, when I go to my 8 to 5, it's the work that I put in. Like, yeah, I might be providing a product, but I am that person that makes that product valuable because I'm doing the work. So I'm really the product here. And the same thing goes with rap. Like, I will be an image. I will be a persona. I will be the person that gets marketed. I will be the person that has to take the heat from the fans and the news and all that. So then I'm like, nah, I'm cool.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need all that. And if I'm going to be the product, I want to bring a service or a product that is valuable, that's not going to kill me or tear me down. And I'm always looking for balance. So,
right.
You know, the fame and the spotlight sounds amazing in a fairy tale, but when you put it like just how you said it, just when you look at the reality of things and how things go down for real, like, that's craziness. Like, like you said, you're no longer a human. And like, we done seen people like Kanye West go through mental breakdowns during his job, and his job never stops. You know, it's
right.
It's like, man, poor dude. You know,
right. Yeah, and another example I was going to use is it's because you said the heat from the fans, and the thing is, like, when that was happening, when you increase your sample size of what you have to work with in the world, you find that the spectrum gets very wide. And you'll have people praising you, like, on levels that you've never experienced, but you'll have people hating on you in ways that's just, like, mind-blowing. I had people sending me emails almost every day saying that I was a scam artist and my mother's a scam artist, and they were linking this other video of the dude playing guitar and drumming, and the guy who was singing, and then another guy walks up and he's rapping, and apparently the guy who filmed that never talked to those three people again, and he left. He put up the video, went viral, he took the money, and he left. We put up a GoFundMe, and I remember there was a lot of really convoluted and crazy shit going on, but nobody had any reason to be talking like that aside from what they were assuming. So they were hitting me up basically like, I'm gonna ruin your life, I know what you did, I have lawyers, I have money, I'm coming after you, motherfucker. And I'm like, I'm responding like, I think you should go talk to Donald yourself then somehow, because, like, I don't know what you think this is. And it got really depressing after a while. It got very depressing because it was like, you know, and especially in those first 6 months, people weren't really paying attention to what actually happened. They watched a couple seconds of it and then immediately went off on a tangent. And it's just it's hard to deal with that. And I think personally, I see, I know people who are like addicted to that feeling. For me, it feels so right. Like back then, it was hard. It was just hard. But I remember feeling like I was in my element when I was going through that. Even when I was dealing with people who were like throwing threats at me, I felt like I was in my element. You know, I never really had one of those moments where I'm like, "Oh, they're talking about me. I don't know what to do."
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I kind of felt like I could handle it. And especially all these years later, now that I know that I have something that I can take to that level, it makes me feel even more so like it's meant for me. And then here's another example. I've been tutoring a friend of mine and just sort of like talking to him a lot about hip hop and life. And, you know, he's a Christian. I worked with him in Oregon, and we ended up having these talks about philosophy that he just seemed to like change something for him. So he would hit me up a lot, and he was on TikTok and he was making like, you know, cheesy rap videos, stuff like that. And at one point, because he was doing the thing, get me to 1,000 followers, get me to 10,000, and at one point he was like, well, I have this weird feeling about it, and I feel nervous, and I don't know what it is, and I think it's the hate. He said, I think it's the haters, and I was like, look, not everybody actually wants to do this, and you have to be willing to like dig into yourself to find out if it's what you want. And sure enough, like a month later, he hit me up. He was like, because he had bought a laptop and he was about to buy a microphone, and he hit me up and he was like, I don't listen. I really I don't want to be famous. I don't want to do this. And I was like, look, you know, for one thing, he's gonna have this experience to build off of in the time that he was rapping and doing that he can probably apply to something else in life. So it's not for nothing. But it happens a lot. It happens a lot, and you do have to be willing to challenge yourself to think like, is this really what I want? Because if you don't, and then you get to the door and it opens for you, and then you have to walk back and you really don't want it, you have nothing back there. You neglected everything else that you could have done to go for this thing that you thought was right. And I just find that so ironic. And it's, you know, it's life. It is life. Like you can't control this. People make mistakes. People, you know, people die. Like my own grandfather kind of, he didn't really, it was almost like he didn't get where he wanted to go. And it was a sad ending. And I see those sad endings a lot. And they're really heartbreaking, but at the same time, they're enlightening. And as long as you're willing to continuously like learn heavy lessons like that, you're going to find yourself doing things in life and realizing things in life that you thought weren't even possible. It's like you said, you want to innovate, you want to discover something. And I think that's the spirit of discovery, is challenging yourself from like a genuine level. Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. So one more
It is, man.
One more thing, and then I'll have like one final question to wrap it up, and then we'll cut the recording. So what are some of, like, personally, what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned, not just as an artist, but in life, and perhaps, like, you know, because we both know that they intertwine. So if you learn something in life, it'll apply to your artistry and vice versa. But more so, I want to know, like, what was the most profound thing to your memory?
That I learned through the art and applied to life,
Or the other way around.
or the other way around. Um, I think I kind of touched on it, but to expound on it a little more, it's knowing when to do things, knowing when not to do things. Because let's just take, for example, battle rap. In battle rap, it appears that you're always this warrior that can charge at anyone at any time and in any place and anywhere. But you just cannot take that approach in life. So when you, the same way in music, you got to learn how to make a song versus doing a battle rap is the same thing you got to learn how to do in life. And to me, one of the biggest challenges and things that I'm working on is, yes, I'm willing to take everything head on, but I need to know when to chill too.
Mm.
Um, and so for me, that's probably one of the biggest things, and it's going to be ongoing most likely for the rest of my life. But at least I've noticed it in my mind, like I notice that it's a thing now, and I'm really, really trying to grasp that balance as well as I can.
I like that. One of the it's a metaphor. I don't really fuck with Abraham Hicks that much, but every so often I hear something like I'll hear a soundbite or something while YouTube is on autoplay and I'm listening to like Tony Robbins or something like that. One of the things she said, one of the few things she said that was like genuinely profound was, if you go through life thinking that you need to be at the highest momentum and just trailblaze everywhere, it's going to be hard on you and everything that you believe you are, and it's going to break you down in ways that's going to slow you down when you don't want to be. So if you take the opportunity to pace yourself and be mindful in that way, you're going to get where you want to go faster, I feel like.
Mhm.
And I've kind
It's
of
true. It's
go ahead.
it's very similar to, like, I don't know if you're familiar with running track so much, but it's the same exact principle. If you want to run a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, you cannot start with full speed. You have
Mm,
to go at a nice jog, at a nice pace, keep your breath controlled, and stay consistent. Don't go overkill and don't walk. You just got to have that middle road to be able to get through that at a certain amount of time and not kill yourself. It's all balance, all of it.
yeah, yeah, I completely agree. Um, so final question: do you have any plans right now for future music uh, that you're willing to talk about?
A little bit.
Okay.
So I am looking to make an EP. I don't have a drop date that I can share. I don't know anything else that I can share at the moment, but trust that writing has not stopped, and y'all will hear about it as soon as it's ready.
Word, word. Well, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was like, personally, this was probably the most profound conversation that I've had on the podcast so far. A lot of really, really important points that we kind of dug into. Um, yeah, so I really appreciate this. I really appreciate you coming on. Um, and yeah, that's it. I will see everybody on the next podcast.